Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Ivy Bar and this is my new series called Cup of Crime. If you're obsessed with true crime just like me, then I highly recommend you make yourself a nice cup of coffee and subscribe to my channel as I'm planning on releasing new videos every week. When it comes to today's episode, you should know that it contains mentions of drug abuse and also descriptions of crime scenes, so if that's not something that you would like to hear about today, it's totally fine, and I'm sure we can meet in some of my other videos. Okay, let's now get into today's story. Today we are back in the UK with this pink theme going on, and this time we are in Ipswich, which is a large port town in Suffolk in East Anglia, about 100 kilometers northeast of London. It's surrounded by two areas of outstanding beauty. There are plenty of galleries and museums there, and it's home to about 133,000 people. Now, one of those people was Tania Nicol, who was just 19 years old. Today she was reported missing, which was 30th of October 2006. Her mom, Carrie, reported her missing after the girl failed to return home from work. Tania was local to Ipswich. She lived on the outskirts of town in housing estate together with her mom and with her younger brother Aaron, who was just 15 at the time that she disappeared. When Tania was in high school, she had dreams of becoming a pop star, but she ended up in a series of low-paying jobs. Carrie said that her daughter left home when she was just 16 and she moved into a hostel, and that's when she started using drugs. She asked her mom for help to getting off drugs, but that didn't really work out. In order to fund her drug addiction, Tania began selling her services as a prostitute. Carrie was unaware of that. She thought that her daughter was just working in a bar or at a hair salon. And her father as well, he was really shocked to find out that his daughter was living this lifestyle, and he thought that she really had to be desperate to get into prostitution. Her parents and her former high school colleagues remembered her as very lovely and lively, very kind-hearted, someone who was always ready to help anybody who needed her. And some friends remember making up dances with her. Another friend remembered how Tania used to braid her hair when the friend was pregnant. On 30th of October 2006, Tania left home about 10:45 p.m. to get on a bus to Ipswich. Her mom called her about 15 minutes later to confirm that Tania really was on the bus, and she was. And after that, Carrie never spoke to her daughter again. Police launched an investigation saying that they were extremely concerned about the disappearance, and Carrie also was obviously very concerned, and she said that it was extremely unlikely for her daughter to not be in touch with her family. The police launched a further appeal for information when a second prostitute went missing in the Ipswich area. Her name was Gemma Adams and she was just 25 years old. Her boyfriend of 10 years, whose name was John Simpson, reported her missing on the 15th of October. When she failed to return his text. She was last seen on West End Road, where she lived in Ipswich, around 1:15. Gemma grew up with her parents, an older sister and a younger brother in Kesgrave, which is a village near Ipswich. Her parents remember her as a bright and bubbly girl who grew up riding horses and playing piano. Others also remember her as being very vibrant, very ambitious, very smiley. She was said to be someone who always had a smile on her face and who was very kind-hearted. Someone even said that Gemma was like a girl that every other girl wanted to be, that she was very confident, very beautiful, and she had her whole life ahead of her basically. After school, she had a part-time job at an insurance company, and she was also taking an GNVQ in administration. And for those of you that don't know, GNVQ is a type of qualification in the UK that prepares people to work as a technician or take up employment in a skilled craft or trade. Now, when Gemma was just 17 years old, according to her dad, she got into the wrong crowd and she began using heroin. It's said that she also became addicted to crack. Her parents really tried to help her. They took her to the doctors, to like a drug rehabilitation facility, but unfortunately they were unsuccessful. and Gemma soon lost touch with her family, and she turned to prostitution. Her parents, they didn't know that she worked as a sex worker, but her partner, who I mentioned before, John, he was well aware of that. It was the 2nd of December 2006 when a member of the public discovered a naked body of a woman in the waters of Belstead Brook at Thorpe's Hill in Suffolk. It was announced that it was the body of Gemma Adams. After a postmortem was performed, no official cause of death was established. However, the doctors found out that Gemma was not sexually assaulted. Her death raised even more fears about the whereabouts of Tania because the two cases were very similar. Both women disappeared from the same area, worked in the same trade, and specialist teams began searching the area where Gemma's body was found, fearing that Tania might be somewhere in there as well. Those fears, unfortunately, would prove real just 6 days later, because they found a second body of a young woman 2 miles from where Gemma was found. It was unfortunately the body of Tania Nicol. A postmortem was performed on her. She wasn't assaulted, but again, an official cause of death could not be established. The examiner said that she might have been in water for about 5 weeks, although there was no evidence of drowning nor any other visible injuries. Her body was naked, and her clothes or her jewelry, they were nowhere to be found. Just 2 days later, police announced that another body was found. A passing motorist noticed a naked body of a woman in a woodlands area of Suffolk. The police confirmed that it was the body of Annalee Alderton, who was just 24 years old, and she also worked as a prostitute. Annalee was last seen on the 3rd of December when she got on an evening train from Harwich to Manningtree. She then got off that train and she got on another one that was going to Ipswich. She had a 5-year-old son called Freddie, and most of the time she lived with her mom Marie and her partner Tim. But from time to time she also lived in the Colchester area, however she didn't have any permanent address in there. When she was younger, Annalee moved with her mom to Cyprus in 1992 after her parents split up. However, they both returned to England in 1997. I think Annalee spoke fluent Greek, and she was also remembered as very intelligent. She was a student of Ipswich High School, where she was getting really good grades in all her exams. However, when she was just 16 years old, her father, Roy, died of lung cancer, and that basically made her world fall apart. She became really rebellious and she got hooked up on drugs. Just like the previous 3 women, to fund her addiction, she turned to prostitution. Annalee's body was found in a crucifix-like pose with her arms outstretched. A postmortem concluded that she died of asphyxiation and also that she was 3 months pregnant at the time of her death. The police couldn't officially link the 3 victims together. However, they were worried that there was a serial killer on the loose, and they were warning other sex workers to stay off the streets. A further shock was just around the corner when 2 days later, 2 more bodies were found. The first one was Annette Nicholls, 29 years old. She was found naked in a crucifix-like pose, similarly to Annalee. She wasn't sexually assaulted, but a definite cause of death couldn't be established. Annette was 5'3" or 158. She was slim and she had long brown hair. In 2002, she completed a 4-year course to become a beautician, and she wanted to open her own business. She was often found at friends' houses where she helped them with makeup. She gave them advice for like nice skin, and she also gave them different treatments. She was found to be very organized. She always had an immaculate house. All the bills were always paid. Her car was insured and taxed. She was a single mom to her son, Farron. People think that there was a change in her character when she moved from a small council house to a bigger home association house. Then she asked her mom, Rosemary, to play a more substantial role in raising Farron, and the 2 women were pretty close, so Rosemary happily agreed. Some of Annette's friends think that it could be due to a boyfriend or something, but basically, soon after that, Annette started using heroin. Just like The previous women that we talked about to fund her habit, she turned to prostitution. She was last seen on the 8th of December in the evening in the town's red light area. She failed to return home from work, and she lived with an unnamed man at the time. So she didn't return to his house after work, and her family reported her missing because they were worried when they heard about the murders. The second body, found the same day just a few hundred meters away from where Annette was found, was that of Paula Clare. She was 24 years old, and a post-mortem showed that she died because of strangulation. She was last seen alive on December 10th, and just a few days before her disappearance, she gave a TV interview in which she said that she was very cautious of getting into cars, but she did that anyways because she had to fund her £500 a day drug habit. Paula moved to East Anglia from Northumberland, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing it right, so if I'm not, then sorry. Anyways, she moved there a decade before her disappearance following a split between her parents. Soon after that, she was actually in a local newspaper because she helped a pensioner when she fell down. However, according to her mom, within a year she started using heroin, and within a few she was already heavily addicted, and she turned to prostitution to be able to afford her addiction. She had 3 children with her partner, Elton Norris. However, all 3 were taken into care due to the drug addiction. Paula told her mother a few months before her disappearance that she was really terrified, but she really wanted to earn money to buy a house and to fight to get her daughters back. Her sister Alice said that Paula was just an ordinary woman who had a kind and loving soul, and that the life she found herself living wasn't actually the one that she wanted. Suffolk Constabulary linked all the murders and launched an official murder investigation, codenamed Operation Stomach. The media tried to come up with a name for the killer, and some of the names that they came up with are the Suffolk Strangler, the Ipswich Ripper, the Red Light Ripper, or the East Anglia Ripper. On a press conference, the police revealed that they thought that the places where the bodies were found were actually deposition sites, which meant that the women weren't actually murdered there. They were murdered somewhere else, and then just their bodies were dumped in those places. However, they didn't say anything about where they thought that the women were actually killed. They also revealed that they found some items of clothing and jewelry, and that they were doing some forensic investigation to check whether any of those belonged to any of the murdered women. The investigation was really intense. There were over 650 police officers involved. They reviewed thousands of hours of CCTV footage. They knocked on doors. They interviewed other sex workers. On December 18th, they made a first arrest. They arrested a 37-year-old man whose name was not revealed, under the suspicion of all 5 murders. However, the man was released on bail, and later the bail conditions were cancelled as no further investigation connected with this man was pursued. A man called Steve Wright was arrested on the 19th of December because a significant amount of his DNA was found on 3 of the victims, and fibers from his home and from his car were found on all 5. Steve's DNA was put into the official crime database back in 2002 when he stole 80 pounds from a pub still. He was charged with 5 counts of murder on December 21st. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our Steve here. Steve was born on the 24th of April 1958, so he was a Taurus. He was born in Erpingham, Norfolk, I believe it's pronounced. He was the second of 4 children, and his father was a Royal Air Force policeman. His name was Conrad. His mother was Patricia, and she was a veterinary nurse. He had an older brother, David, and 2 younger sisters, Janet and Tina. The family's life was a little bit chaotic because they had to move all around the world to wherever Conrad was being stationed. And they lived, for example, in Malta or in Singapore, and Steve sometimes also stayed with his grandparents in England. Patricia walked out when Steve was just 8 years old. It is said that when Steve Steve saw her on a train station in Ipswich was the last time he would ever see her. However, in some other sources I read that he actually saw her later in life when he was an adult, but that it wasn't a very pleasant meeting. Anyways, both parents remarried. Conrad married a woman called Valerie. They had 2 more children together, a son called Keith and a daughter named Natalie. Conrad claimed that Patricia just abandoned her family. However, the woman said that she was forced to do so because of the abuse that was there in the marriage. And she said that she really wanted to take her children with her and that Steve was actually afraid of his father, but she was prevented from doing so. Steve's life was really complicated. He couldn't hold a job. He was constantly switching trade. When he was just 16 years old, he left school and he joined the Merchant Navy, where he became a chef on the ferries sailing from Felixstowe. When he was 20, he married a woman called Angela Donovan, and they had a son together called Michael. The couple separated in 1987 and they later divorced. Steve then became a steward on the ocean liner called Queen Elizabeth II, and that's when he started using the services of prostitutes. That is also where he met his soon-to-be second wife, Diane Castle, who was a window dresser for one of the shops. They soon both quit their jobs and went to together run a bar in Norwich. The pub was called the Ferry Boat Inn, and it was located in the city's red light district. The couple wed in 1987, but that's because the brewers told them that they had to be married if they wanted to run the pub together. But according to Steve's former wife, the marriage was a disaster and they split up within a year. Steve lost his post due to gambling and alcohol abuse, and he was actually declared bankrupt in the 1990s. He tried to commit suicide twice. The first time was in 1994. He tried to inhale carbon monoxide in his car. However, he was found somewhere in an alley laying and he was taken to a hospital and saved. Sarah got a suicide note from her ex-boyfriend around that time, which said that he really missed his daughter, that he didn't want to be a part-time dad, and that he lost everything. Keith, so his stepbrother, said that this failed suicide attempt really changed Steve. That before it, he was outgoing, he liked to joke around and go grab a beer with his friends, but afterwards he became really quiet. Then in the year 2000, Steve tried to commit suicide for the second time by overdosing pills after he came back from a 10-week trip to Thailand. Before he went to Thailand, he sold all his possessions, including his house and car and furniture. And with that money, he went to Thailand and he was using services of prostitutes there. He claimed that one of the women robbed him and that he lost everything once again. And after he came back, he moved in with his father and his wife. Steve met his new girlfriend Paula Wright around the year 2001 in Felixstowe, and soon after they moved in together to a house in Ipswich. At first, I think they were quite happy together. However, after Pamela started working night shifts, Steve began using the services of prostitutes again. He began going to these massage or sauna establishments, which were actually brothels. And it's assumed that in the final 3 years before his arrest, he paid at least a dozen sex workers. One woman named Kira, who was also a sex worker, admitted that she knew Steve and that the girls felt safe with him, that he was a nice guy, but she changed her mind one time after he pinned her down and scared her. Steve had many different jobs throughout his life, like I mentioned before, and before his arrest, he was a forklift driver. The trial began at Ipswich Crown Court on January 16, 2008. Under cross-examination, Steve basically said the same thing all over again. He said that all evidence against him is coincidental. He was basically repeating, "If you say so, it appears so. It seems so." The trial took 6 weeks, and this whole time, basically, Steve showed no emotion whatsoever. He had no feelings. He didn't feel sorry for the girls, for their families. He had this sort of dead look in his eyes. His defense was that he had professional relationships with all the women, that he knew all of them personally, and that's how his DNA got on them. However, after 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all 5 counts of murder. On the 22nd of February, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge was against parole due to how deliberated and premeditated the crimes were. And now Steve is serving his whole life sentence at Her Majesty Prison Long Lartin in Worcestershire. In March the same year, Steve wanted to appeal his sentence. He said that all the evidence against him was not enough to prove his guilt, and he also wanted a new lawyer. However, this appeal was rejected. He then was preparing to a second appeal, which he later dropped. Steve has been linked to many other murders around the area of Ipswich and Norwich. A criminologist, David Wilson, who worked on his case, said that he felt that the murders were way too precise for someone who was murdering for the first time. So it just looked like Steve had done this before. And there were many unsolved murders of sex workers around Norwich before the 2006 murders. In July 2021, Steve was arrested at the prison where he was serving his sentence under suspicion of murder of Victoria Hall back in 1999. Victoria was just a 17-year-old girl who went clubbing one day in Felixstowe, and she never returned home. Her body was found 5 days later. She was naked and none of her possessions were ever found. Later, Steve was released from the arrest, back to prison, I imagine. The investigation appears to be still ongoing. In 2001, there was a businessman who stood trial for her murder. However, he was cleared of everything within like 90 minutes by the jury. That is everything that I've got for you today. What do you think about this case? Do you think that Steve really killed all those 5 women? Do you think that he killed before? Do you believe that he deserves the whole life sentence without parole? Or was this all just a big coincidence and he was actually innocent? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and also feel free to leave any recommendations for any other cases that I could cover in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And please take care, stay safe, and don't be afraid to speak up for yourself. I will see you soon in my next video. Bye.